Welcome back, college football fanatics. This is College Football with Sam, and today we have Joe DeLeone from the Ruffino and Joe Show and also from Bleacher Report joining us to talk about Indiana traveling to Notre Dame to kick off the first ever 12-team college football playoff, as this is the first-round game of the new playoff system. So we're going to be talking about that, and Joe DeLeone is a reporter for Bleacher Report, and he also has his own YouTube channel, The Ruffino and Joe Show, which I mentioned a few seconds ago. So just search up his name on Twitter or on YouTube preferably The Ruffino and Joe Show, spelled exactly as it sounds, and you'll find him and his content. Follow him through those avenues, and also, before we begin, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and also share this content around, because on College Football with Sam, we're trying to become the next big college football channel. And I also know that the Ruffino and Joe Show very much has that as a goal of theirs, and they do a very good job. I tune into their stuff fairly often, actually more than a lot of the bigger accounts. So hopefully our accounts can become the next big thing. But how are you doing, Joe?
I'm doing great after that almost unintentional pep talk he just gave there. Like I'm juiced up, and it's the biggest thing for me is collaborating with other creators that are also trying to be on the come up. So I've always enjoyed talking with you, Sam, and we DM often, about expectations for some of these teams, and it's great to catch up. And I'm just hoping that Notre Dame can win this dang game.
So how important is this game? Because I remember watching your show after the Marshall. Not Marshall, but NIU. It feels similar because they're both lower level teams, both very shocking. And yeah, I remember watching that and you saying this is the reality of Marcus Freeman, and I wouldn't be shocked if he got fired because of this game. Not this year, but maybe down the line. This is kind of the sign that things are ending. So Have your thoughts changed on him, and also how important is this game for the Fighting Irish?
Well, they definitely have changed, considering the fact that he just got an extension. But to relive where I was and a lot of Notre Dame fans, where there were such a finite amount of Notre Dame fans that were saying that, Marcus Freeman's going to recover from this, he'll be fine, it's overly reactionary to say he's going to get fired. There were a very, very small amount of folks that were actually saying that. Everybody was either in the camp of he needs to be fired right now, or the belief that I had of they're going to give him another couple of years. This thing is going to cap out at 10 wins a season, and they might consider moving on, or he was going to jump ship and get another job elsewhere. The reason why that thought, I think, really sunk in was because there was no singularity situation here with the NIU loss. That was not just a one-off bad loss. It had become a recurring trend, a trend where his first year, really talented roster, first time ever, young head coach. There was maybe no expectation that they were going to go on to be a national championship winning team, but they could have been, with a favorable schedule, an 11-1 team. And they weren't able to get...
They played competitively with OSU, and then they lost to Marshall and Stanford. What?
With Tyler Buckner at quarterback, and then, those two losses, and then the following season to look as good as they did against Ohio State, and then to lose to Louisville and Clemson the way that they did. When the NIU loss came, it was just the final wave of frustration for Notre Dame fans. But I have walked back my takes on him getting fired and him not deserving of the job. The biggest thing that I said in order for me to want to eat my words was, how do they respond? Do they come out in every single game where in all these losses they were super freaking slow and they were very lethargic and they waited until the third quarter to turn it on, or they didn't even turn it on at all, which means there was a lack of preparation, there was a lack of focus in practice. The big thing I said is, how are they going to play in all these games the rest of the year? If they have any duds where they play super close with a bad opponent, I would still feel very insecure about his future and the future of the program. But what he did is he came out against Purdue and he smoked them. And every single team that they saw down the line, they hit the ground running and they played smothering defense. They were turning the ball over. They were running the ball really well. Mike Denbrock realized that he needs to stop trying to force Riley Leonard to be impactful as, a deep ball thrower and attacking downfield, and instead just give him the layups and run the damn ball. And that has worked. So I give Marcus Freeman credit. I think that this is now in a position where I don't know if we'll ever become a national championship team under him, but the recruiting and the capability of young freshmen who are contributing early is a very, very positive sign that makes a lot of haters like me of Marcus Freeman, as I've been coined, feel very, regrettable about saying that he couldn't get the job done.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I've been impressed with how effective they have been, particularly at running the football. And it's something that I thought in the preseason where, they had the injuries on the O-line and people said, well, they're going to, that won't help them against A&M. And I thought to myself, I think they've recruited well enough there, and they have Joe Rudolph's one of the best O-line coaches in the country from his time at Wisconsin. I've thought that. And I thought it was pretty clear, if they're good on the O-line, that injury isn't going to affect them that much. And you see this year, it's one of the best O-lines in the country per Pro Football Focus. And when you run for over 6 yards per carry, that's not just because of your running backs. That's also because your O-line's getting downfield and doing well. I've been very impressed with that, how they've, game controlled all of their opponents to death, whether it takes 45 minutes or it's over in 10 minutes. It has been very impressive. But I also see that I've been impressed with Indiana in the same way, except for that one game, the one loss they've suffered. And something that these two teams share is their strength of schedules are not as strong as the usual Big Ten and SEC contenders in the playoff. Indiana's faced one elite team in OSU, and they got crushed. Notre Dame hasn't really faced an elite team. They've been more dominant than Indiana, but they do have that NIU loss. So I guess this was supposed to be one question, but I'll make it two. Do you think either of these teams are national champion contenders this year? Do you think the field is weak enough, or maybe that they're underrated in that perspective, or what are your thoughts there?
I think the field is definitely weak enough because even if we look at the best team in the field right now, Oregon, that a lot of people are coining as their national champion, including myself, they have a deficiency in the run defense. Their run defense was exposed against Penn State when they gave up as many rushing yards as they did to Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, and that bodes well for a team like Notre Dame. I think if there is, of this matchup specifically, if one is a national title contender, it's Notre Dame. They have, as what we just talked about here, they have strengths in areas that can win them football games through this stretch that they have. If they beat Indiana going up against Georgia, who's got a backup quarterback in, Notre Dame's secondary and pass rush is so good that they can force turnovers and get interceptions and get strip sacks like they've done to a lot of other quarterbacks that they've seen. It just all depends on how Notre Dame's offense plays in that game. And then if they're going to advance and they get to take on Penn State, I think Penn State's looked strong and they weren't able to get the job done in the Big Ten championship game, but they themselves also have deficiencies where we have seen Drew Allar, when he's pressed and has to actually make reads from the pocket, he makes mistakes. His worst game that he played against USC, he was forced to actually read and make decisions, and that led to the interceptions that he had in that game. Notre Dame has the bones, but for what you're talking about here, neither of these teams have really truly been tested. Indiana has been, and I think that's why the resounding feeling is that, oh, Notre Dame is going to kick the crap out of Indiana. I don't think that's the case. I think these teams are very similar. I think that Notre Dame has the advantage of just having more premier talent because that they've been recruiting and they have the ability to recruit 4-stars and 5-stars. And Indiana, for what it is, has been exciting, and they've been blowing their way through the mid-level and the back end of the Big Ten. Similar strength of schedule to Notre Dame. They don't really have that game-changing guy that they can rely on. Notre Dame has that on both sides of the ball and multiple positions. They've got Xavier Watson and Don Schuler in their secondary. They get Riley Mills and Howard Cross in their D-line. They have Jeremiah Love at running back, who is a premier player, and their offensive line, as you talked about, is super highly recruited and stout. Kurtis Rourke's a great player. He's somebody I like for the upcoming draft. But we saw what happened when he went against a good defensive line and how smothered he was because the guys in front of him could not block. And while Mikail Kamara is one of the most productive edge rushers, who outside of that are they going to rely on. I think one just underrated player to throw in there, Jalen Walker, who's a linebacker for Indiana, is a very underrated player in this matchup. How does he play against the run? He's very fast. He's very explosive. But there are just not many premier athletes on Indiana's team that I think if this game's close, Notre Dame finds a way to squeeze out because they can just turn to somebody to make you're just a huge, explosive, game-shifting play.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I do think that Notre Dame is more of a national championship contender, not by much, but more than Indiana, mainly because of that premier talent. I do love Indiana's D tackles, Tyrique Tucker, CJ West, James Carpenter. I think they have one of the better D lines in the country, and they do have like Pons at cornerback, who is small but very much makes up for it, and he's still pretty young, so we'll see where he goes. And I do think that they're, receivers. I think Indiana is more balanced than Notre Dame is. Like, better passing attack. Their rushing attack is still competent. Their defense is one of the best. But Notre Dame's strengths are almost entirely non-negotiables. I don't know if Indiana, outside of maybe their rushing defense, has something that you can't just scheme around and you have to go through. And thankfully for Notre Dame, they have the nation's best rushing offense. So while Ohio State couldn't run the ball on Indiana, and their O-line's very thin, for Notre Dame, you're hoping that that isn't going to be much of a problem, that they can at least lean on that and play off of it. So what's your prediction here? And why are you picking whatever team you're picking to win?
I think Notre Dame wins this football game, but right now, a lot of the books has Notre Dame as a 7-point spread. It opened at 8.5, but a lot of people are betting in that direction. And I think that Indiana is too competent of a team and too well coached of a team for it to be a 7+ point victory. The other aspect is we know that there is an expectation. I don't know if there's for sure going to be snow on the ground, but it's currently going to be a 27-degree kickoff. If there is snow and there's those conditions, that always creates a low scoring game. Both these teams have productive defenses. Those defenses, I think, are going to show up, especially in the run game. I feel like if what this game is going to be, somewhere in the range of Notre Dame 24, Indiana 17, or a little bit less than that. But I think that Notre Dame does have what it takes to win, despite there being an active away crowd from the Indiana fan base, because apparently from what I'm hearing, they're traveling well and they're making their way down to South Bend. But I got to stick to here that I can't root against my Fighting Irish, and this is a situation where the talent gap should show up, just like it did when Indiana played Ohio State.
I think that's a very sound point, and I do think that when I do my deep dive in this game, when I'm going to look at more analytics and talk about it for 30-40 minutes and watch some film when these teams have played their better opponents, I'm probably going to lower my score prediction, because my score prediction was initially high. I look at this game and I kind of see it in the way of it's a team in Notre Dame who has really, really strong points. Like, I know they haven't faced a lot of elite passing offenses, but that passing defense is legit nonetheless, and they have NFL players there. I know their D-line is good, and I know that their rushing attack is legit, because if you're running for 6 yards per carry, I don't care what your schedule is, you're running for 6 yards per carry. I think that with great coaching, with a long time to prepare, and also just the fact that I think there is going to be chaos as there's been this year, I'm siding with Indiana, but I'm going to lower my score prediction. I initially had it in like the 50s and 60s, but with snow and the cold temperatures and the point you made about these defenses being great, probably better than both the offenses, at least recently, I think they'll show up here. And Notre Dame can absolutely win. I kind of just see it as a little bit of a Michigan TCU situation, where a team that is more well-rounded and that maybe has the better game plan is going to come and pull something off. But I could be wrong. It's a little bit of a gamble.
It's certainly feasible, because this does set up a situation with scrappy underdog that has had a chip on their shoulder every single game. And Notre Dame, as we opened up here talking about, they have overlooked opponents in the past. Now, thankfully, they haven't done that in a while. They have not overlooked any opponents. they have been locked in on a week-to-week basis. They have been a lot more short-sighted than having this long foresight to their path to, winning a national title that they saw in week 2 before they were paying attention to their upcoming opponent. I think because it's in the playoff situation, they're not going to do that. But if Notre Dame does get caught up and they start slow, Indiana's not the team to start slow against. Notre Dame can't be playing catch-up against Indiana. They can't get into an early scrap fight with them, trading blows, because they didn't come out firing on their first offensive and defensive drives. They need to take control early because, again, this is a coaching staff that knows how to go for your throat when you're least expecting it. They need to take that early commanding lead, and then they need to lean on the run game like they've done in a lot of games this year where they've had success, and to generate those turnovers to help them win. I still stick with Notre Dame. I'm not going to go against them, as I said, but I do sadly see that path where I keep bringing up here. Anyone who thinks this game is going to be a blowout and it's a surefire Notre Dame win, I think is a bit naive of a take to have if you're a Notre Dame supporter. You got to realize that Indiana is still a very good football team.
Yeah, they are. And a big part of the reason why Ohio State was able to get on them in a big way is because Indiana made a lot of uncharacteristic special teams mistakes, and Ohio State's passing offense. I mean, Indiana's defensive backs are a little bit small. Ohio State's passing offense, when it's on, is one of the best in the country, and their defense, for what it's worth, is like the best in the nation per S&P Plus. So I kind of feel like that may have been its own thing, but then again, talent does favor Notre Dame. And the fact is that Notre Dame can probably suffer injuries in this game that Indiana necessarily can't at a variety of different positions. So, yeah, I think this is the most entertaining playoff matchup in the first round. Don't you? I kind of see Clemson, Texas being a Texas blowout. SMU, Penn State could be entertaining. Same with Ohio State, Tennessee. But I think this one's really fascinating.
I think Ohio State, Tennessee has the most on the line, and it could be the most dramatic.
Yes.
But I agree with you. I don't think that I don't know how deliberate this was with the scheduling timing or if it was pure circumstance. But the fact that this is the opening game is the most exciting, that we're getting a matchup between two teams of two completely different backgrounds of people from the state of Indiana, and nationally they're both, obviously IU is an Indiana school, but like I know so many people from across the country that went to IU that it's not just purely Indiana folks, that both of these teams have presences everywhere, and they're colliding in, the joking term, the Indiana State Championship game, in a setting where we could have snow, where it's going to be freezing. It's going to be at Notre Dame Stadium, the most historic stadium of the bunch, or at least one of the most, if you want to compare them to the Shoe, but one of these most unique stadium atmospheres in all of college football. It's just so fitting. I'm so glad that we're getting this, and it's, it wasn't just some dipstick team that was hosting the first game. I don't know who exactly that would be off the top of my head, but it just feels so right that we're expanding the playoff and Notre Dame gets to host it, and we get to see just the buildup for the excitement. And I just hope that this game is thrilling, because it could really set the tone for what is going to be a super, super fun to watch college football playoff as this thing unfolds.
Yeah, we got triple. Or no, we don't have triple. We have quadruple the amount of matchups compared to last year.
Yeah.
That's just awesome. I do think the playoff does have its flaws, but I think that, I think that in the here and now we should be grateful with all these different matchups that are happening. And of course, we got the quarterfinals, semifinals. How far do you think Notre Dame will go? Not how far could they go, but you're predicting them to win here. So is it too early to look ahead a little bit from like your perspective to Georgia or the semifinal? Like how far do you think they're going to go?
I think realistically, sadly, I think realistically they're probably going to get stopped short against Georgia. Now, I'm, as a fan, I'm rooting for them to roll all the way through and reach the national championship game. But I try to, anyone that tunes into Rufino and Joshua knows that I try to be super unbiased when I break down Notre Dame, and it's hard sometimes. Them going up against Georgia, I just fear that defensive line and that secondary that has caused so many issues for opposing quarterbacks. You saw the way that they made Nico look. We saw the way that they made Quinn Ewers look in both matchups. The only guy who had success with Jackson Dart, who is the most underrated or was the most underrated quarterback in the country this year for how decisive and aggressive he is. Those guys that they caused problems for, that had turnovers and took big sacks and had fumbles, I have a fear that Riley Leonard's not going to be able to hold up in that situation. And they were able to completely take away both teams' opposing run games, especially Texas. That won't happen for Notre Dame, but if they're able to slow down Notre Dame's run attack just a little bit, that does not bode well for Notre Dame, because they need that to open up their offense. If they get one-dimensional and Riley Leonard starts getting into these third and medium, third and long situations, that's where those interceptions come up. So I'm very fearful, even with Gunnar Stockton, that's going to be a tough matchup for them to win. Rooting for them, but I got to let reality set in that could be a close loss for them, and that they could drop that game to Georgia.
Yeah, I think that Notre Dame is a lot like, because I'm a Michigan fan, I think that they're a lot like the Michigan teams of 21 and 22, where you have that awesome rushing attack, but if that gets slowed down or stopped,
yeah,
you don't have much else on offense. But it's intriguing because Georgia's defense is elite, but then again, I think that when we use the term elite for 2024, we really mean in most cases only relative to this season, because it's a weaker field than what we've seen in a while. And I wonder if Notre Dame's rushing offense is as good as the numbers say, maybe that's actually elite and not relative to this year. So maybe they will be able to just plow their way through teams. I don't exactly know, but that's what I'm excited for. And as for Indiana, I think that Indiana, I don't know. I think a lot of these teams can go the distance, but I would pick Georgia to beat them, because I don't think Indiana's trench play, like, I just envision that even though Georgia's secondary has had some issues against Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart, and Indiana's receiver core is good, ultimately that O-line against Georgia's D-line, and also the fact that Georgia just finds ways to win, and it's more of a home game for Georgia because of where the Sugar Bowl is, closer territory, I think that Georgia would find a way to win that game.
I think that the Georgia would smoke them. Sadly, I don't think that if Indiana wins this game, that's great. It's good momentum. But for what we just talked about for that Notre Dame Georgia matchup, Indiana's O-line is not going to be able to slow down Mikail Williams or Jalen Walker.
No.
That's not going to happen. So no, they'd get their asses kicked. I'm sorry. The point spread's probably going to be 10 plus. I would take Georgia to cover. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't just straight up blank them in that matchup. That is a terrible, terrible matchup for Indiana. And I'm sorry, I got a lot of friends who are Indiana fans. I'm sorry, guys, if you end up finding this video, because for some reason you guys keep finding the guest appearances I've done this week. You guys will get your asses kicked by Georgia. We need to be realistic about that.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go as far to say it would be a whooping, but I would not pick IU to beat Georgia. That would be kind of like, okay, you're facing the best head coach in the country. You're facing a talent roster that isn't built like OSU's, but just from a raw, broad perspective is similar. I have to see it before I believe it.
Yeah.
Like that kind of situation. Well, thank you for coming on. I know you got to leave here in a few seconds, so thank you for coming on, Joe. Remember to check out Joe DeLeone's Twitter. Just type in his name in whatever search bar. And also the Ruffino and Joe Show. Look that up and make sure to subscribe to his channel and pump those numbers up. And remember, if you haven't already, subscribe to College Football with Sam, like the video, comment your thoughts down below, share it around, and go Fighting Irish. So thank you for coming on, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.